And it is a hot afternoon here in Tel Aviv, and I don't know what the weather is like in Austin. Pamela, tell me.
Well, I think it's hotter here potentially. I didn't
Prob-
expect it to be this hot over here.
Probably it is. Pamela is the chief medical officer of Medable, and she's originally from Belgium, where the weather is a bit cooler than Tel Aviv and Austin. And my name is Danny Lieberman. I am the host of Life Sciences Today. This is our 20th podcast in 3 months. We're moving right along, and it's a pleasure to have you, Pamela, on the podcast. Um, So let's kick off the conversation with your personal journey to Medable and long-term patient follow-up.
So, well, thank you first of all for having me. This is a true honor. You're an icon of our industry, and I've always followed you for a long time. So, thank you again
Oh
for
my
doing
God, the
that.
expectations are like,
Yes, they're very high, but I don't think I'm the only one. So, thank you for having me. So, I've been interested in medicine, I think, since I was a child. And I've always wanted to be a doctor. And I was a doctor for a while, but I soon felt that I could help people more if I could work in a different way on clinical trials, because your job then involves potentially helping people's lives way more than one-on-one patients, which, by the way, was very satisfying. I just always felt like I wanted to do a little bit more. And so I got into clinical trials. Over the years, I did everything from working at what is now the DCRI at Duke University in Belgium first, and then in the US. Then I went to work at a hospital where I ran a clinical trial center. And I was always interested in making sure that, when you take a medicine, you want to make sure that that medicine does what it's intended to do, and that you understand the side effects of it so you can make an informed decision as a doctor when you prescribe it, or as a patient when you take it, as to whether you want to take that medicine or not, and whether that's going to help you. So working at a site was really interesting for 12 years, really working with patients who were enrolled in clinical trials and sort of seeing firsthand how hard that was on people. We did exacerbation of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and those people had to sit there for like 8 hours to do their study day, because they had to start off with no medication. They got medication, pulmonary function tests at timed intervals, and the last one was like at 8 hours. So it took a lot out of people. And when I looked at the people we enrolled, it was people that could, right? It wasn't the person who was sitting at the cashier working their full day because they couldn't take time off. It was the person that was retired and who could come and spend some time with us. And then it also showed how skewed that information was that you were then getting, because it was a slice of the population that did not necessarily represent everyone else. So then when Rob Califf was talking to me about potentially coming back to to Duke, there were a couple of opportunities, and the one that interested me most, and it's a long-winded story, but it'll get me to Medable, was about improving clinical trials. And having been at it from the sponsor side, from a site perspective, I was a patient in a trial once. It really intrigued me that the industry field wanted to come together with all the stakeholders to make things better. So I ran the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative for about 10 years, 9 years and change. And Medable was one of our members.
I did.
Well,
I never knew that actually. We spoke before the podcast. I didn't realize you're one of the CTI movers and shakers. Oh my God.
yeah, no. I ran the clinical trial information transformation initiative for about 10 years, and it was very satisfying. But one of the projects we ended up doing is we had this approval process for taking on new projects, and our members could help us pick what the projects were going to be. So I joined in 2012, and Leonard Sachs kept telling us, you should do a project on technology. And so we would pose it to the members, and they would go, oh, yeah, we really should, but it's too hard. We're not going to do it quite yet. So then in 2014, he was like, the city was co-founded by Duke University and the Food and Drug Administration as a public-private partnership. So the Food and Drug Administration had the opportunity to tell us to do projects. So in 2014, they were like, okay, do this project on technology. So we ended up doing this project on technology, which ended up being a program of different things, because first you need to make sure you have the right endpoints. if you can use technology, because your endpoints could be very different, right? A 6-minute walk test at the doctor's office, walking around cones or in the hallway taped off, looks very different than if you use your Apple Watch. So those kind of things. Then we had a project on identifying the right technologies. So not just going like, hey, we should use an Apple Watch, but kind of thinking about what is the meaningful aspect of health you want to measure, and then what is the best system to measure that. Then we had a project about how patients and caregiver and doctors thought about decentralized technology in clinical trials. And then we had one where we put it all together in recommendations for these CTs. Medable was part of those working groups. And at some point, Michelle called me and said, hey, what do you think about coming to Medable and actually making it happen, this technology piece? And obviously that was very intriguing. Medable is a a great company to work for. They're really trying to shake things up with technology. And so that's how I ended up at Medable, really trying to think about how can we create the value for sponsors to do clinical trials in a different way that gets them to the answers faster, because we can enroll better. That makes it easier for patients to participate in those trials, because now those people that used to come to the site in Sarasota for like 8 hours, maybe now they could stay at home a little more and they wouldn't have to come. And you could actually enroll somebody who lived, further away than the 2 hours. Potentially that would make them go like, oh, that's really nice, but I can't really drive that far for every month for 2 hours and miss, a whole day out of my life. So it kind of culminated like 30 years of experience in clinical trials into like, let's see how we can make technology work and have this thing go better.
Well, that's a long story, but it's an amazing story. It's a great story. How you just like you and Michelle just kind of, met at the right time at the same
Absolutely.
place. Yeah.
And I think that's also part that, because people often ask me, how did you get here? And it's sort of this combination of happenstances, right? That you
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, this looks interesting. And I've always kind of gone for the things that were interesting to me, more than, maybe other things. Yeah.
That's right. I think by the way, that's what that someone told me the other day was said, if you have a story to tell, make it an interesting story. Okay. It shouldn't be, spiritual and impactful. It might be also spiritual and impactful, but make it an interesting story. Apropos of that, I had a woman on my team who was a site coordinator at Hadassah Hospital. And I wanted someone on the team, actually in the pre-sales team, who would actually knew the stuff hands-on. Because and and when the first thing we asked her at the interview was, so what's the biggest challenge for patients in clinical trials? And she said, parking. And
Exactly. Parking. And
yeah,
hospitals charge for parking. Like,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, you did some work with Teleshomero. I mean, Teleshomero is
and
pretty
also
big.
Hadassah too, actually. Hadassah too. That's
Hadassah,
when they have
is
the windows, right, in the chapel.
that's
That,
right, and the Chagall windows, right? But so
yes.
so Hadassah Medical Center for our listeners is a huge complex. It's bigger than UCLA. Okay, it's like in terms of space, and geographic. It's a sprawling location, and they have shuttles, around the hospital to take people. You have to wait like 15 minutes for the shuttle, or you may take a walk, and walk up the hill because the parking lots are down the hill from Hadassah. And Jerusalem is very hilly, so it's a challenge for people. That's what Batya said. She said parking biggest challenge, and she said we were doing actually, it might have even been what was it? It was I think atopic dermatitis study, and they were using a watch from Philips, and that would measure scratching. And at the time, so we're talking a few years ago, at the time was the patients would have to come in with their watch, bring it to the site coordinator in the dermatology department, who would put it in a receptacle, would then download the data into the
Oh, wow. Yeah.
into the PC. It was like incredibly crude process, okay? So it was incredibly crude, probably today unnecessary process, but 10 years ago when they were doing that atopic dermatitis study, that's what they could do. And it was something stupid as having to find parking and then bring your Philips watch into the dermatology department was a challenge. Um, the You guys have been working. You had a press release about using Medable's technology for long-term follow-up for gene therapy, which is actually mandated now for 15 years, I believe.
Correct. Yeah.
Um, that's a great use case for this, and I think it really illustrates how we can take technology and meet it with the regulatory requirement and do the right thing for people. So you pretty much, explain this out, but let's talk about this particular product. Okay, so how do you create value and who do you create value for? Your customers are
Pharma and biotech.
pharma and biotech.
CROs. Yeah.
So what kind of value do you create for them with this product?
So when you think about the mandate for long-term follow-up, it really is about making sure that these therapies, which are usually injected about one time, and they have, for life, they can be curative, and they alter things in your body clearly, right? Because they could be curative. A gene is replaced, and somehow now your condition is gone. What we don't have, the reason the regulators want 15-year follow-up is what are long-term effects of this? Like, is this one-time shot that has potentially gene altering and DNA altering capabilities? What does that do long-term? And the long-term is two things. One is if you gave something curative for hemophilia, for example, does the hemophilia come back over time? Is it something that maybe it lasts for 5 years and we have to do it again? We don't quite know that, right? What is the, like durability of the treatment? And then the other part of it is what other things may it do?
Is
Could
it
it
safe?
is it safe? Could it cause blood cancers? Could it cause other types of cancer down the road? So the reason is valid. The reason why you want to do this long-term follow-up is they're still new. You want to make sure they're doing it right. So then you get to, well, we need to get that data. So patients, there was an amazing survey from the Emily Whitehead Foundation, who was maybe the first patient in Australia, I think she was, who got CRISPR therapy, I think it was. And so she founded this foundation and they did a survey that showed that people that got CAR T therapy, which is similar, right? Cell and gene, CAR T therapy, like 20% of them stopped participating in the long term altogether. So now we're losing that data, and we don't know for the next patient what it may or may not do. And then 80% of them stop participating after 5 years. So that tells you whatever system we have now is not working. Additionally, we're doing it the more old, I don't want to say old fashioned, but whatever the word is of not using technology, more in the traditional brick and mortar style where patients do have to come in personally to do these follow-up visits because it involves blood work and it may involve imaging to make sure that the tumors aren't growing, whatever the thing may be. So currently, the other part of this is that these patients, the treatments and the clinical trials, bring in patients from far and wide. So if you do a trial with CAR T or cell and gene therapy, you can imagine somebody with hemophilia in Washington State might be interested to come to a trial in New York City because they don't have it locally. And if you want to get rid of your disease, like it's worth it, right? It's worth it to come to that trial. But now they've signed up for 15 years of coming back to New York, which
That's
kind of doesn't really work.
that's a
Uh,
schlep. That's a big commute.
and we have heard people, I think a group at UNC had patients coming from Australia, just to show you that people come from far and wide. Like it could be domestic, but definitely also, in a different country, from a different country. So now we're sitting here with the cost of doing it the brick and mortar way, the patients saying they're not really interested in doing the schlepping or whatever and the parking, I'm sure, whatever it all is. So what can we do differently? And for pharma companies, this type of study is also becoming very expensive because of all of that. You need to maintain infrastructure, you need to maintain a whole lot of things. So it becomes, one group told us that it requires you to have basically what do you call that, the local, but like the banking reserve system of a country to be able to do this, because this is only going to increase. The more therapies that are being put into patients, the more 15-year follow-ups we have at the moment, right? So this is just going to mushroom into more and more patients having to be followed for 15 years. So it's very expensive. So what we have decided is that we can create a system where a lot of the things that need to happen to do that follow-up safely could happen at local physicians, because a blood work, whether you take, a complete blood count in New York or one in Washington State, it's kind of the same, right? You just need to get the information over. Regular imaging is also pretty much the same. So we're advising companies to use local providers that then send the data to one central site if possible, or maybe just a few central sites that you need to keep open. In the historic way, you have to keep all the original clinical trial sites open, because that's where the people would come back to get their 15-year follow-up. So it reduces the infrastructure required. And then the participants, you can think of alternate ways of maybe capturing some of the physical exam things. You can do a really good symptom questionnaire and things like that that people could fill out on their phone. And then if something is looking like maybe there's something going on, whatever that trigger is that a pharma company decides, then the site can call that patient and go, we'd like you to go into your local physician and get a physical done to see if anything is happening. So it's a complete rethinking of really modernizing in some ways of how you would collect that data.
So this actually becomes not a siteless system. It becomes a single site system serving a
It's
large
a
number.
hybrid system. It's a
Mhm.
hybrid system, yeah. And
Right.
it kind of feels, the regulators have hinted that this is possible because they've created recent guidances on DCTs, on decentralized clinical trials, but then also on trials in the local communities. So the local healthcare providers could take up some of the work. If it's within the standard of their practice, then they can take that work on, and then the data gets transmitted and still collected. And what
That's
we
really
hope because of that is that you can actually see more of the data on a regular basis, and it's easier for people to participate, and they'll continue participating. The other thing I want to mention is I'm on a working group with Harvard Multi-Regional Clinical Trial Network Center, and they're having a long-term follow-up project. And what they're saying is that, this is only going to increase. And so we really need to get to standards of what is acceptable and what is not. Yeah.
so so sort of break it down for me in terms of the dollars and cents for and money. So it's time and money for the pharma, right?
Time and money for the pharma, but then also really ensuring that you actually get the data. So it's making it easier on the patients so that those 80% of people that say they're not going to continue past 5 years, that they will continue. And because in some cases they have found a, something popping up earlier. And then what you have to do, typically the first 5 years, a twice a year contact. And then after that, it goes to once a year. In some of the studies, they were saying that they had to go to 4 times a year because there was something that seemed to be popping up, and they had to increase surveillance, if you will. If you do that in a brick and mortar system, then the patient now
But
is like twice as much burdened, right?
or four times as much, and that's crazy. So the people who pay for the application are the pharma companies, and for them
Or the biotechs, right?
or the biotechs, in other words, people who are actually making the products, and then
Correct.
and then what they get is they get more data faster for less money. Plus, I think, and this is kind of an interesting intangible, I don't know how intangible it is, but basically, if you have a 15-year follow-up, it ensures that they comply with the regulation and they collect as much data as they can during the 15-year follow-up for the patients. That's correct?
That is correct. The other part of this is not just for patients that are participating in clinical trials. Some of the things have graduated, if you will, to approval, right? Some of those treatments have graduated to approval. So it also applies to people that are getting it in the post-approval setting. So those need to be followed as well. So this group of people that needs to be followed is really going to balloon up, and we need to find systems that make this sustainable for everyone, for the participants in the study, in the follow-up, and the companies paying for it.
Yeah. So it sounds like a huge win for the pharma companies. more data volume, more data velocity, and certainly probably as a result of that, also greater variety of data, but also it costs less money and it helps them comply with the regulator, what's not to like. That's basically the
Correct.
the value proposition. So when you go to a biotech or a biopharma, how do you capture this value? Because it's kind of made up of a few things, right? It's time, it's money, it's volume and velocity of data. How do you, what's your go-to-market for this?
So it's in some ways what we do regularly anyway, right? We change clinical trials and make them more technology uh, first with the patient in mind, typically. So any clinical trial can be decentralized to a certain extent. So this is really thinking about you need to collect this data. What part of it can we decentralize? So in that sense, it's not really different than the other studies that we do. So our go-to-market is basically, we'd like to start off in the phase 3 if possible, because then we can capture the patients from the beginning of the trial, and then at their last trial visit, they need to consent clearly to the 15-year follow-up. So then they're in the system and they're used to the decentralized elements that we have. The other part that I did not mention is there's a televisit angle to this as well, so that if a participant wanted to talk to somebody, they can go on. It's a Zoom-like system that is 21 CFR compliant. So that's another component of it. So our go-to-market is basically, here's your trial, and then sort of, you purchase the license for the platform, and then the elements that you need, and we go from there. Yeah.
Got
But
it.
we
So
find that it is cheaper than what you would than in a traditional model.
well,
Yeah.
it must be cheaper, right? So pharma then is actually paying Medable for the technology and the support, I guess, and the maintenance. So it's kind of like what, like a SaaS model?
It is totally a SaaS model. What we don't have is the clinical services to go around it. So we still would need to partner with somebody to sort of organize the clinical part of it. But we have been able to do that. Yeah.
That's a really that's actually we did I want to tell everyone we did not actually Pamela and I did not actually coordinate this question, but it's sort of like, in basketball when you pass the ball to someone else, you just pass me the ball, which is the obvious question in my mind at least, is then why not move up the value chain and become a CRO?
That may be a question for Michelle. She might need to be your next your next
Maybe tell Michelle that I want to talk to her. Okay. Yeah.
But
Am
I
I?
think but I think a different way of thinking about this question is what part of the data is e-source captured directly as source versus what part of the data is EDC? That's another angle to that question, right? What part of the question is entered directly into the system as source of the data as source versus what part of the system is entered as by the site with another source available to them as data entry. So it's
So, so
So I think the source, if you look
take
at all
it. Come on, Pamela. Take out a moving part. Okay. There's a moving part here with no added value. You just spend 20 minutes explaining to us how efficient the system is and how you've got it figured out that you can come to a central site and you can save parking and you can get the work done and you can have your local physician do the blood work for you and it's not that hard. There's no, I mean, gene therapy is rocket science, okay? But in terms of the actual cleanups here, the cleanups here is mostly just some coordination and your software, your fabulous software platform. So I mean, I'm still struggling with why you guys don't move up the value chain for this project.
Well, we have just started a partner program with CROs, and we find that that works really well together, where they do that part and we do the technology part. So
Hmm.
I think that is the route that works well for us now. I think that's yeah, I'm not sure that we're ready. Like I said, the question about whether we're going to become a CRO, that's totally a Michelle thing. I think we have the middle ground where we work with the CROs and we do that very well.
No,
So
I get it. I get it. It
yeah.
was just going through my head, and I'm thinking, why do they need us here? Okay. Anyhow, so that's sort of an obvious question, which is probably in someone's head right now, not just me. Finally, the last question is actually a question. It's kind of like an interview question, which they always ask you in interviews. Oh, Pamela, where do you want to be in 5 years? You know, the 5 year question. But here's is kind of like a three in one. So it's like, what are the three things you, Pamela, want to do for your customers in the next year?
So I want to deliver more data and evidence about the impact of using decentralized elements. And we're doing that with the Tufts Consortium, and we're supporting the PACT Consortium that is creating that data. And I'm very proud of the work that we're doing with Ken Getz to sort of show what we're hoping to show modularly is which elements contribute what value to the end-to-end system, and also get a sense of in which therapeutic areas which elements works best. So that's kind of the evidence piece that I think is missing, and I hope everything will show that it has a tremendous impact. But if it doesn't, we need to know it and we need to tweak things. So I think
Right.
that's an important piece. The
Number one. Number two.
Number two. Number two is we've been working with Harvard, the Multi-Regional Clinical Trials Center, on resources for investigator responsibility. Because investigator responsibility, when I was at a site for 12 years, it was very clear, right? All the data was collected in the walls of the site. The investigator was responsible for all the data. That's
Right.
what they say on the 1572 or what they say on the equivalent in Europe. And now that is a lot more unclear, people would say, as to how can a PI certify that they are responsible for the quality of all the data when that data is being collected maybe by a local provider over here, by the patient themselves, So we're creating resources, and those are going to be launched on the 28th or 29th of September. And all these resources are freely available. Like there's no firewall between them. People can download them. People are participating. We owe a great debt to all the people that are participating on the PAC consortium and the MRCT working group on PI responsibility. So that's number two. And then the third one is I really want to start work on a new project that really, like how I like to think about this, adoption is hard, right? Adoption of something new. That's just generally hard. And what I'd like to do is peel the obstacles away. And as we're doing these projects on evidence and the project of PI responsibility, my goal is to figure out what the next obstacle is that needs work. And then either work with Tufts or work with MRCT. We've done some work with Duke University in the past and kind of get to that hurdle. So if any of your listeners have a really thing of Pam, this is the next thing, I would love for them to let me know.
Okay, that's a totally great answer, actually. I love it. Um, so it's been a pleasure talking to you, Pamela. This is a Life Sciences Today podcast. My name is Danny Lieberman. I'm the host of the podcast, and it's been my pleasure and honor to host the Chief Medical Officer of Medable, one of the probably the founder of decentralized trials. And God, what 10, 12 years later, it's been a long haul, but you're doing the job that has to get done. Uh,
Great.
the podcast will go live in about 2 to 4 weeks. It takes, if I knew how much time it would take, that's probably my next startup to write an AI agent system to do podcasts. In the meantime, when it does go live, look for us. We're on all of the channels on Spotify and Apple and Google and YouTube, and of course on the web. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.